Hello, everyone. It is hard to believe that it is now April 2025. And why is this important? Because this is my 5th year anniversary of doing the podcast. And I don't know if you remember, but I started the podcast in April 2020, 1 month after the beginning of COVID. And that was because I had lots of information to provide, but could not do it in person, could not do it in a conference, could not do it in a seminar. And a friend of mine said, "Why don't you do it on a podcast?" And back then, I did not know what podcast was. So my friend helped me set up this podcast. And it's really, really hard to believe that we are now 5 years later. So for those of you who have listened to me for 5 years, I apologize. I probably hurt your ears for 5 years, but here we are. So thank you for being loyal listeners, and thank you for supporting me all these years. This episode today is special because after 5 years, I also have noticed that the financial literacy movement among healthcare professionals is taking momentum. And it's taking momentum in a really, really beautiful way because I have been able to find a young lad, a young physician who also has the same enthusiasm, the same eagerness to help fellow healthcare providers, physicians, nurses in developing financial literacy because we believe how important it is. So, this episode is this interview with Milad, an ophthalmologist, and I will let him introduce himself later. But this is really the dialogue between two individuals who are like minded and also very, very interested in helping the medical community to acquire financial literacy so that we create financial wellness, which in my mind, as you know, I've said it many times, is the antidote to burnout. So without further ado, I will leave you guys in the good hands of Milad, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
How's my financial health, Doc? Welcome to the Financial Literacy Podcast for healthcare professionals, where financial security and wealth topics are not a taboo.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Everybody, come back to How is My Financial Health Doc podcast. And I am back, Vuket Tran, back at the seat. And hopefully we'll have a really nice discussion. We have today with us a colleague, a good colleague. I met Milad on LinkedIn, I believe, as well. And you know what? I got a lot of bromance on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has really worked well for me. So I have here Milad with us, and we're going to be talking a little bit about, professional and personal challenges as a healthcare professional, as a physician, and how this relates to finances. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you Milad. Milad, how about you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
First of all, Vu, thank you so much for having me. The bromance goes in both directions. I had the pleasure of meeting you a little while ago. Had the chance to come and see you in action at the Code Green Financial, which was an amazing conference. I learned so much about it, so thank you for setting that up. And a little bit about myself. I am an ophthalmologist working at the Herzog Eye Institute in Toronto, Canada, and I came through the educational pathway at McMaster. I did my medical school, did ophthalmology at McGill, went down south of the border in California to do cornea fellowship, came back in a very unusual time of COVID, where all of a sudden all the hospital doors were closed. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I had the opportunity to actually work at the Herzog Eye Institute doing lots of cataract and refractive procedures and even some cornea as well. And I really kind of gained a footing here, and I love Toronto. I've been here for most of my life, so The opportunity to be back and practice what I love, where I love, has been nothing short of extraordinary. But as we're going to talk about, it really provides learning opportunities and learning the hard way in many aspects to sort of understand important topics in financial literacy that I'm sure we're going to chat about as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I did not realize because you just said something that it never even crossed my brain because I've been in practice for so long. I just assumed, you know what? I've been in practice and COVID came and left, and I'm still in practice and I'm still working, and nothing has really
Right.
changed for me. But you just mentioned something that is really important because I didn't even think about it. All the brand new grads that graduated during COVID was a very challenging time.
Yeah.
Describe to us a little bit how that was and what were the doors that were closed? What were the different challenges for you as a brand new grad during that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Vu, essentially, when I came from California, there were job opportunities lined up, and I thought everything was going to go great. And I came back, and all of a sudden, I came to shuttered doors at every hospital. When the chief of hospital and the chief of surgery is not operating, a new grad is not going to get the job. It's as simple as that. And there was obviously safety considerations. There were OR closures on a regular basis. I think for 1 to 2 years, on a regular basis, ophthalmology was not having the OR time it was expecting in order to be able to keep up with cataract volumes and other, emergencies and things like that. And I'm sure that it was the same for all surgical specialties. And so for new grads, that was almost a bit of a crisis because, the thing that the social contract and promise we think we have as healthcare providers and physicians in Canada is you do the training and then you got a job. You never thought the hard part is going to be getting the job, but you realize that that was a real challenge. But as an opportunity on the back end, a lot of elderly physicians use this opportunity to also think about their life balance and possible retirement and things like that. And so it actually all of a sudden opened up a lot of doors. So it was a lot of shuttered doors and a lot of open doors. And so it's been an interesting aspect navigating this newfound environment in the GTA and in Ontario, at least in ophthalmology.
I see what you're saying now. I've had a few colleagues who this is many years ago. They graduated in orthopedic surgery. And at the time there was not a lot of OR time and not a lot of orthopedic opportunities within a hospital. So I can definitely see how this can become a challenge for all the surgical specialties. And
Right.
so now COVID just added on another layer to that already being existing, right, for at least 5 to 10 years. And now you have COVID adding to that. So now you're in your first 5 years of practice, correct?
Yeah.
You're getting your footing. You started a practice. It's working out well, but you said the word, the social contract. So we go into med school, accumulate a whole bunch of debt. I'm sure it must not be cheap to be studying in California. So you rack up a whole lot of debt, and now you have to climb out of that hole. And now you're coming back and say, too bad, the social contract has changed. So explain to us a little bit how you experienced that or how you experience that now. What are the different worries that you have because of that?
So, I mean, you're not unique to ophthalmology, but all of medicine, we all have delayed earnings just because of the training period required. And, once you come out, you are expected somehow to already know not only the medicine, but how to run a practice, how to manage its related finances and all that. And you don't, and we don't even speak that language. And there are many opportunities throughout my education that I specifically remember that we were suppressed from that education. And so, you come out and you want to provide the best care that you can to your patients, but you realize you still got to get home. You still have to have a roof over your head and provide for your family and all that, and that creates certain financial worries that you never want to affect patient care, and that's really the most important thing. One of my motivations for understanding financial literacy is to figure out, okay, how do I ensure that my finances are well taken care of? So when in a patient, I'm facing them, and all I think about is them and their well-being and my most ethical standard of practice. And you never want to sort of make decisions that are in any way less than patient care. And so when you have that financial literacy and the knowledge gained, you can sort of focus better on what ultimately matters when it comes to patient care, a patient-focused approach that is free of any other biases, because ultimately we're all human. So when I came back, I just wanted to sort of learn those set of skills as fast as I could in order to be able to make the right decisions foundationally in my early couple of years of practice, so that I can have a more secure practice and career for many more years, both for myself and my family as well.
Like I'm so far from being young and from being in my first 5 years of practice. But if I were to ask you, as a professional in your first 5 years of practice, where you are now, what would be in your mind the most top three or top four financial challenges still, at least in 2025, for someone like yourself? What would you say those would be?
So I think the top challenges as an early grad is obviously getting the job that is addressing your needs as much as possible. Again, the originally and historically, everyone presumes that they're going to get a hospital job. The entire landscape of medicine is shifting beneath our feet. Both the public versus private healthcare, hospital versus out of premise opportunities is changing. And so, where is the job that you see yourself practicing long term? So, securing that job is important. Understanding and again gaining the foundations of financial literacy, I think, is critical, because they'll set you up for the future. And the specifics of, again, you're probably, mid 30s or early 30s, you're thinking about a family, you're thinking about buying a house, trying to maybe, put in your first few dollars of investments in wherever you're told or advised by financial advisors and banks and whatnot. And again, trying to make sure that do they have, my interest in mind? Do they have my best interest at heart? These are all things that we contend with. And we really have a bit of an imposter syndrome, because yes, we're good doctors, but we don't know any of this. But we have to almost sort of learn the hard way, and learn by trial and error, mostly error, and kind of go from there. So the biggest challenge is not only sort of setting yourself up both at the practice and at the finance level with mortgages and debt repayments and all that, but also just making sure that you're approaching this the right way and understanding the basics of financial literacy as you prepare yourself for the rest of your career.
So, if you're thinking basics of financial literacy, what would be the top few things that you say, you know what, someone in my position now, and maybe for the next 5 years, we should really learn? What do you think those would be in your mind?
Great question. So the first thing is, if you're still in debt because of school, I think that's just understanding how to optimize debt repayment is really important. Um, Obviously, investing 101, that comes in many different forms. And I'm still learning, and which is why, before I had the pleasure of being on this podcast, I was a long-time listener and trying to learn from long-term experts who are, again, as fellow physicians, you guys have our best interests in heart, which is really important, because you don't know where you're going to get the right information from. And so that was really important. And thinking about, okay, well, now you're going to invest. How do you structure, cash flow? If you're thinking about mortgage and debt payment, do you have enough to sort of, for a rainy day? And sort of saving is important as well. And if you're at all, there's an entrepreneurial bend. This is even something that is less foreign to any of us doctors, especially in the Canadian landscape. In the US, there is a business-minded approach in medicine. In
Yeah.
Canada, it's not as much. And so even how do you structure a buy-in, a buyout, equity, sweat equity? All these things are just things that we have to kind of understand the first time by Googling it. And so if that's an area that, certain physicians are interested in, they really have to sort of, get mentored. And those, I would say, are some of the biggest things. And we've talked about even previously offline about things like insurances and protecting yourself and protecting your wealth, because as physicians, all we have is ourselves, right? There is no pension per se. Of course, you're working to change that, which is amazing, but um, disability, life insurance, critical care, and these are something that is not for everybody, but it may be for some physicians. And to understand and differentiate yourself in a world of misinformation, both intentional and unintentional, is really important.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned one thing. As physicians, we are our only asset. I believe I explained this analogy on podcast before, but I think we've discussed it that we are the printing machine, and so if
Right.
we're not in good health, physically and mentally, then we stop printing. We stop printing the dollars, right? So, and then what happens to all the debt? What happens to all the investments that were been made? And people say to me, well, Vu, I didn't make any investment. Well, you did. Either you did or your parents did, right? So your
Right.
parents made investment in you so that you get to be where you are. And if you don't protect that, then all the investment that your parents and my parents have made is now gone to nothing. You mentioned McGill.
Yeah.
So I went to Sherbrooke and I went
Yes.
to Université de Montréal,
Fellow Quebecois.
right? But I also went to the University of Hard Knocks. So,
Fair enough.
so you mentioned a
Uh,
lot of trial
uh,
by error and mainly error. And
right.
that's where most physicians learn how what they learn through errors.
Right.
And I think it's important that people like us and before us teach the next generation what not to do, right? Because
Absolutely.
we could do it all different types of ways. There are good ways of doing it, there are bad ways of doing it. And it's really important to not do the bad things because that will set you up, set you backwards so many years. And for some of them, it's
Right.
not recoverable.
Yeah.
And so it's important for someone like yourself, or even me at this point in my life, I'm still making lots of financial errors and mistakes, but that's a learning journey. But
Yep.
it's important to start off with the right foot.
But I agree with what you said. First of all, we are going to make mistakes. By definition, we were not professionally trained for this. And even professional finance guys are going to make mistakes all the time. So if they make mistakes, we really
Absolutely.
have to be a little bit more forgiving onto ourselves. We're always expected of physicians to be perfect in everything we do. And maybe we've always been, A+ students in every aspect of life. And then you come out and you realize this is a completely different ballgame that you are not trained for. And so forgive yourself, but educate yourself. And if there is an opportunity to learn through mentorship from fellow physicians who understand your value system, understand what you went through, and the challenges, the unique challenges as we physicians face, I think it really behooves us to take on those opportunities. And again, I commend you for having taken on this important role. And in my own ways, I've tried to do that as best as I can, and I hope to sort of continue to collaborate with you in ways to just say, okay, guys, we don't all have to make the same mistakes, sequentially, and all have to make it before we kind of figure it out. Why don't we continue to sort of engage each other and have a sort of peer-to-peer educational process, formal, informal, course-based conferences and meetings where we can just have an honest conversation about, yes, the medicine, but also the practice management. And to me, this goes well beyond just me and you and a bunch of physicians. This is how healthcare can be better structured if you're thinking about it the right way. I think no one would argue that physicians are the most empathetic about how healthcare should be provided. And so if we are at the helm of how healthcare is structured, rather than people who are administrators or kind of CEOs and think more on an Excel sheet, they may not see the patients in front of them, and we do. And so if we can understand and speak the language of both medicine and business at the same time, that patients are going to be better off because of us. And ultimately, you and I are only going to see so many patients per day, per week for the rest of our career. But imagine the compounding multiplier effect of not only educating each other, but being able to positively influence the healthcare structure that ensures that healthcare providers are well remunerated. They have a lifestyle balance. They're ethically focused and patient focused because they don't have to worry about what's going on at home financially. And ultimately, I think the entire population and the entire healthcare structure in Canada can benefit from healthy, emotional, financially well-balanced physicians.
I 100% agree with you. I think, and this is before my time because I'm not, while I'm old, I'm not old enough to have seen this, but I think physicians have moved and walked away from leadership many, many years ago. I think at the time we were thinking, oh, let's just practice medicine and let's leave the administrative of the system, the administration of the hospital to the administrators. And I think we have done ourselves a disservice by doing that because we have walked away from skills that are, you know, needed to run a well-oiled, effective machine and system. And not knowing the frontline medicine, not knowing the clinical medicine, not being with the patient one-on-one, and not having that insight only gives you administrative insight. Whereas if physicians walk back into that role and say, you know what, I'm going to be a physician, but I'm also going to be part of the administration. I'm also going to be part of the leadership. I'm also going to be part of shaping the system. You imagine what that clinical insight will add to that leadership and administrative role. So I agree with you that physicians need to walk back into those roles. And
And I don't think we have much of a choice, Vu, because if we don't, and if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And
oh, for
I don't
sure.
think any a committee or a group of physicians would disagree that if they're not present at the advocacy level, at the governmental level, at the PR level, slowly they will see the rights that they have gained over generations and decades slowly wither away. And ultimately, it goes back to, they start sort of cutting corners because they ultimately still need to provide for their families. And then again, patient care is negatively affected. So it is a unfortunately self-fulfilling prophecy and a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and we see it now, right? We see it. You and I
Yeah.
live this every day. What would you say would be your maybe top few learnings that you've acquired so far? Whether it's your own personal experience or even from experience from other people, what have been, a few learnings that you can share with the audience even today? Say, well, here's what I've seen that didn't work well, and here's what I've seen that worked well. What would you say?
I would say a theme that I've noticed both personally and amongst friends and colleagues who are in medicine is because we, again, are not experts, by the time we hear about financial news, things have already happened. And so let's say a small example. When my mom calls me and tells me about what is Bitcoin, rather than buying, I should have already sold, right? Because if it's trickling down to people who are not financial experts, like physicians for the most part, we start chasing trends and often too late. And we are often, left holding on to a hot potato. And so not having a good understanding of basic investment fundamentals, how to think about, simple concepts like, price on earnings, and how do you think about, what is this a really good stock or not? Should I buy? Should I not? Should I get a active financial advisor versus a more sort of ETF based on the global markets and all that? Because we just don't know, we go based on whatever resources come our way. And often, if you're the one being chased rather than you, the one chasing information, the one who's coming to you may have other motivations in mind. And so these mistakes are things that we learned the hard way because we finally talked to someone like Vu, who's been doing this for a long time. And I'm like, hey, I've been doing, this stock, or I've been working with this active investor, active advisor, or doing this kind of insurance. And turns out we could have done a lot better, and it really creates an opportunity cost. One of the challenges being a physician is that because we are well remunerated, generally speaking, we can afford mistakes. And so we start making lots of mistakes and lots of small little dumb mistakes, right? And while we're lucky enough that we can kind of get away from them and sort of survive them, whereas maybe the average person would not be able to survive a couple of these catastrophic mistakes, it doesn't change the fact that it is still an opportunity cost. If you buy a really, really expensive house that you couldn't afford and you become house poor, sure, you may be able to afford it, but what is that opportunity cost and where could that mortgage have gone in terms of the compound interest on years of being able to invest in a market that's growing maybe 15-20%, maybe not this year as long as Trump's around, but at least, last year, right? And the concept of opportunity cost only starts to make sense to physicians because they start valuing hourly time. They say, okay, per hour, I can make this much amount of money, but they don't think of opportunity cost in different ways, right? It's not just how many hours do you spend. Um, it's what can you do with the resources that have been garnered over that hour of income, and where can you spend it? You're right, you could buy an expensive car, but can you also do something that ends up providing passive income for you and for your future generations?
I'm so glad you brought up these two concepts. And the concept of opportunity cost is not familiar to us. And so I'm so glad. And the other thing that I'm so glad you brought up is, yes, we make a good, decent income so that if we make mistakes, we typically will recover from them. And so we don't, because of that, we don't think of the mistakes, even though they have been made. We don't think about them because
Right,
let's just move on to the next thing, right? But by moving on to the next thing and not having reflected on past mistakes, if we were even aware of it, then we
right,
don't take the learnings from the opportunity cost. And
absolutely,
and and those mistakes keep perpetuating year after year after year. But you know what's even worse? Is we teach that to our residents and we teach that to our medical students,
right,
right? And so if I've never learned from it and I don't learn from it, I don't teach it to my next generation, the next generation is doomed. Doomed, I say.
right.
So we need to learn it first so that we can teach it. Because in reality, medicine is a teach one, do one, sorry, see one, do one, teach one, right?
That's right.
So if we learn bad habits and we do bad habits, we'll teach the bad habits. We really need to
Yeah.
break that cycle so that we teach the next generation. And
Right.
so this is a good segue to talk about the teaching in the next generation because you and I have talked offline and you kind of alluded to this as well that you know what we need to teach. We need to be able to share. And you have started doing some of that. So just share with us a little bit, what are some of the things that you've started doing in teaching finances and financial literacy, but you also have a few plans. Now, may not necessarily want to share all the details of it, but what do you see in the future as, financial literacy in medicine? How do you see this?
Yeah. So, this opportunity and my interest in even financial literacy at a relatively early point in my residency was a bit fortuitous because when I was in Montreal, my friends and my social network was all in Toronto. I didn't know anyone, and I became the events guy at McGill. And so, in order to be able to fundraise for certain events, there were again financial entities that were really interested in engaging residents. And I thought, okay, there might be a win-win situation where you guys educate us on the things we don't know yet. And in doing so, you can sort of provide us some opportunities to sort of learn more about your services. And as these personal conversations with these people and these organizations fostered, I realized I need so much to learn more about my own financial well-being. And as we started to sort of continue to do this sort of evolved into annual events where ophthalmology residents or medical students were able to learn more about the basics of financials 101, investing 101, insurances 101, and sort of if they are interested, they could sort of pursue that. And many of them, some of my financial guys are still from Montreal because I've trusted them and learned from them over the last decade during my early trajectory. And so now I'm hoping to pass on some of the knowledge and the fundamental education that I've learned with, again, some of my ophthalmology colleagues, with other early grad physicians, just to sort of let them know, hey, you should just think about this. Doesn't mean you should talk to this guy or that guy. In fact, my suggestion is talk to everybody, but you don't know what you don't know. And we just want to kind of spotlight blind spots that exist in our financial knowledge, um, because there was no formal training for it. And so my hope and my dream, if you will, is to create almost a Canada-wide financial literacy curriculum that should be taught for all residents, because it's the one thing, it's the one currency that moves across all fields of medicine. It doesn't matter whether you're a pathologist or an ophthalmologist or an ER doc. Guess what? You still get paid with a Canadian dollar. And so if you can understand how to save, deal with debt repayment, practice management knowledge, not only are you able to sort of avoid things like burnout because of financial challenges, but also provide better patient care. And so I would love to see a curriculum across the entire country. But again, small steps. One of the things that I was able to learn so much from was, again, that Code Green Financial, the program you put together. Just an annual get together of peers who are interested to learn more and educate other peers. And my hope is that informal process continues to sort of trickle down across all aspects of medicine. And then, long term, we'll see how we can formalize some of these processes. But I look forward to collaborating with you on that as well.
I feel the enthusiasm, I feel the passion. If we wanted to do this, if we have a magic wand and say, here's what I think should happen in the next 2, 3 years, what would you like to see happen?
In terms of how to sort of help educate fellow physicians on financial literacy,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think both Magic One and practical, realistic steps. The more practical, realistic steps is opportunities for engagement of fellow physicians. I would almost consider a financial literacy course or a conference that evolves into a course, whether virtually or in a person, that is directed towards our needs and our unique challenges and opportunities. This is not like healthcare MBA. This is like, okay, you are a regular physician and you need to understand how to protect your assets, how to protect yourself, how to care for your family, how to still provide great care, how to think about passive income, just certain key topics. And then based on that engagement and that sort of reciprocal feedback that we get, you come up with, the perfect curriculum or the perfect educational topics that the majority of physicians, whether you're working in a hospital and you never do anything else, or you got 5 different medical enterprises, it's all going to be relevant to them to some degree. And then hopefully at the residency level of really any specialty, a small but dedicated part is to train the next generation of people who are coming into medicine, just simply how to think about finances. This is not to make you cynical. This is not to make you business focused or not lose sight of patient focus. But I actually think in order to provide good patient care, you should be a well-balanced physician. And if you don't have home base and you don't have good defense, you can't even have offense being good patient care. And so, to me, if we can create a curriculum that moves across the entire spectrum of physicianship and medicine in Canada, I think everyone's gonna win. But it takes small steps like peer-to-peer course content, peer-to-peer conferences, maybe in our own subspecialties, because maybe let's say we have unique focuses as an ER. I know you guys have a very different practice pattern than a surgeon, than a family medicine, but there are common themes across all for all of us. And I think we'll be really well served to have a physician who understands your needs and is also trusted by our Hippocratic oath and also our commitment to each other as fellow colleagues and friends to speak in a language that is free of bias and ultimately speak of interests that are physicianship focused rather than advisors coming our way and trying to sort of tell us what we should do.
We are in 2025. It's almost the end of the year, right? We're already in April. Oh my God, where did
We're getting
time go?
there. We move fast.
We move fast. So, where do we go from here? And the more important question is, how can we help you? How can the community, and when I say the community, I mean the medical community. How can the medical community help you in shaping that vision and making that dream possible?
Look, the first thing is what we're doing, just talking about it. I don't know if it's your child, but at the beginning of the intro to your podcast, a child's voice comes out and says, where financial topics are not a taboo. I don't think they should be. And if we can just have an honest, open, transparent conversation about what we're facing as physicians within the realm of financial literacy, practice management, healthcare management, the challenges between administrators and physicians and allied healthcare professionals, if we can just have an honest conversation about those things and we demystify what happens and what's happening at our individual level, we can begin to have a more structured conversation about how to think about financial education. The other thing is, if there are people who are interested within your own domains, within your hospitals, just be willing to engage experts. To me, a financial advisor is an expert in what they do. You do not need to engage in their services, but you certainly have the opportunity to learn from them, shake their hand, thank them, and then make your own decisions. And to me, the only way to do that is listen to multiple experts, provide perhaps conflicting opinions, and then try to understand, and navigate and maneuver. Okay, where is the truth in all this? If multiple people are saying some things, there must be some themes in that, and be able to pass that on to fellow colleagues when you finally figured it out. There are always going to be financially oriented physicians in every aspect of medicine. And if they'd be willing to sort of stand up and sort of support their colleagues, I think they would be really well, and they should be, in my opinion, well thanked for their services, because this is no different, in my opinion, than the guy who does a whole lot of research and it becomes the expert in the field. We should have financial experts who are physicians to be able to speak the language and translate it to the rest of us. And I think if some people are willing to take that on, being able to collaborate with people like myself and you would be the best thing we could do for our entire healthcare at large. And to me, this is truly not an individual thing. This is a structural, institutional process that we should consider for future generations of physicians.
Very well said. Very well said. For the longest time, I felt like that, crazy nut dancing in the field. I don't know if you ever seen that video of that
Yep.
crazy nut. So for the longest time, I felt like that crazy nut dancing in the field. But more and more, I see people interested, passionate about this topic because you've said it and I've said it many times. But you know what? If you're financially well and you're not financially stressed, that's when you can offer the best of yourself and be really concentrated, practicing ethical medicine with the patient in front of you. When you're financially stressed and you're not well, that becomes harder and harder and harder.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely agree with you. And you mentioned earlier, there are truths out there, and the reality is there are multiple truths, right? In finances, like everything in life, there's multiple truths. The question is which of those truths fits me better, right?
Right.
And so there are conflicting truths, and they may be conflicting because they're not right for you, but they're truths nonetheless. So that's what we need to learn and sort of accept. So, if I were to ask you, let's say we had a great conversation today. I am so psyched. I am so excited because I'm no longer the crazy nut out there. So I found another crazy nut partner. So
I'm right there dancing with you.
absolutely, absolutely. I so much enjoy this conversation. If we were to say, you know what, Milad, what's burning on your chest before we end? What would you say to the audience before we end this conversation today?
Every day I go to work, and I came to medicine actually through global health, and I still love traveling to different parts of the world that are resource limited to provide care. At the same time, I go to a private center that provides the highest level of care and innovates, but does so in certain at the interface of public and private. When we think about healthcare in Canada and the role of OHIP, at least in Ontario, and this is a fundamental principle that we hold dear both as physicians and as patients. But a public health funded model does not mean it should not be open to innovation and should not be archaic in its how it thinks about medicine, practice management, healthcare structures. And if we physicians are not able to even understand and speak the language of finance and business and practice management, we couldn't possibly try to innovate how healthcare is provided for future generations. And other people will make decisions that affect us without us ever being at the table. So to me, this passion, if you will, that you and I share about personal financial literacy goes so much beyond you and I personally. And it goes back to how we can completely structure how we do what we do. When you're resource limited, when I do global health, we have to innovate all the time because we have no choice. When, as we talked about, when you're good enough and you're a physician who makes good enough money, you kind of become a little bit stale in how you think about, how do I do this better? How do I practice medicine better? How do I do financial investments better? And if we can begin to sort of reassess our position in so many of these considerations and conversations, I think we, our families, our societies, and our patients are going to be better off for it. I really think for physicians, by physicians, will be the best way that medicine and practices are going to be well served in Canada for a long time to come. And I'm willing to sort of stick my neck out for it.
Very well said. Very well said. And thank you for sharing that message. It's a message that needs to be repeated over and over and over again. And I'm so happy to have another crazy nut partner sharing that same message. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Vu. And again, thank you for all that you've done already and by paving the path for future generations like myself. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
In having this conversation, I realized one thing, that myself and Milad are not the only crazy nut. All of you listening out there in the airwaves, you are part of this team of crazy nut. So I hope you realize that, and I hope you enjoy that really nice title, because you are the next generation of people who's going to help redefine medicine and help the future generations of physicians avoid burnout through financial wellness, which I believe is most likely and most probably the only antidote to burnout. So I hope you have enjoyed this episode, this conversation. But more importantly, I hope that what Milad and I have been talking about rings a bell and relates to what you're going through or have gone through or may be going through, and that you reflect a little bit on your own personal life and how you can make things better financially and achieve financial wellness. So thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you have enjoyed it, please share it with your colleagues, with your friends, with your pets. That would be really nice. If you have any comments or feedback, please let me know at hmfhd2020@gmail.com. And I am looking forward to hearing from you guys next time. Bye-bye.
How is My Financial Health Doc podcast is hosted by Dr. Vukit Tran. Dr. Tran is a physician with a special interest in personal financial security and wealth education. Dr. Tran does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through this financial podcast. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. Please confer with your advisor, lawyer, or accountant for specific advice.